Welcome to the moment that changed everything, where we interview notable creative people to gain insights into how they got started and learn more about the moments that shaped them and their careers. Today we sit down with Ron McDonald. A while back, one of our guests suggested an episode on a career freelance writer, so we reached out to Ron, who has worked at 40 different agencies in 7 different countries and 4 different continents.
Now, Jim Ranscombe at SMW always had a great line. It's, you know, like he would solve a problem and put it in front of a client. And there was a client one time asked him, like, you know, how long did it take you to come up with this? And he said 25 years. You know, it's just like that, you know, that speed to be able to get to the solutions quicker is, I think that's probably our only real commodity now, is just the experience to get to a solution faster.
To this day, he remains a freelance creative director in high demand. We even cover a quirky story of when Ron was a senior creative on the McDonald's account and met the fictitious Ronald McDonald. It's interesting. Enjoy. Ron McDonald, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I recently had Paul Evans on, and he said, you know what you should do? You should talk to a career freelance writer. And I thought it was a fantastic idea. And of course, your name came up, and reached out, and you were good enough to say yes.
I'm just here for the shameless plug.
Well, yeah. Well, of course, you know, I had another question in mind. It was first question. I'll come back to it.
Sure.
But you know, I know on your LinkedIn profile you say that you're an accidental farmer, and then you came in and you dropped this on us, and I'm like, it's got to have something to do with this. So tell us about what that's like.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle change we made a couple of years ago and moving out of the city. It's funny now coming back, and it just seems to be like so much talk about ageism and stuff. And I don't know if ruralism is a term, but it's really out of sight, out of mind. And hence my willingness to come on and talk about what we're doing up north and things like that.
So would this be representative of a small amount of things that you do up there?
Yes.
And like, tell us a little bit about the lifestyle change. So you were living in the city, you started a family, and then you decided to cash out.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the silver lining in it. We love our lifestyle up there. Our son got sick a few years ago, and he still has an intractable epilepsy, and we just had to get out of the city. He had thousands of seizures, and the concrete wasn't good. So
Really?
we had to just get the fuck out of Dodge. So we moved in a hurry, and it's quite a real estate market up there. So we were motivated to sell here, and we were motivated to buy up there, and we're still kind of suffering the repercussions of that. Like I got a septic system I'm still trying to get fixed, and it's just been a really dramatic, from downtown Toronto to out in the middle of a dead-end road, out in the middle of nowhere. Even to get a bag of milk, you're driving, 15 minutes each way. Chauffeuring the kids around, doing that kind of stuff. But it's been amazing, and the kids are flourishing and thriving. Our son's doing a lot better, and it's all worked out.
It reminds me of, I worked for Terry O'Reilly for a number of years. He bought a place in Creemore.
Yep.
He talked about his property and the things that he needed to do. One of the funny things that he talked about was that, if you're mechanically inclined, you think about farmers.
Yeah, Terry's.
You're gonna get your hands dirty, right? But yeah, he would talk about getting his hands dirty in terms of all that stuff. You're a handy guy, or you grew up that way, or
a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I'm always in awe of a lot of people I come in contact with up there, and the things they can do, and they can knock a hammer on an engine and get it started.
Right.
And, but yeah, Terry and Mike were both. Mike and I moved in together, Terry's brother, and we found this 1-bedroom place in the village, Greek village, and had to build a bedroom in the basement, and that was it was an easy thing to do. It's just like slapped it together in about a day, and Mike was kind of just like, how did you do that?
I'm the guy who holds the tools. Hand me a Robertson. Yeah. Is it the square one or the star?
Yeah.
I'm usually that's usually the guy. So let's talk a little bit about how you got involved in advertising. Where did you grow up?
I was born in St. John, New Brunswick. My dad was a high school teacher. We had 7 kids. He moved to Cornwall, Ontario. He was teaching high school, and so I went to school there, right up through high school, and then Ended up at Carleton University, did a degree in mass communication. From, I don't know, the age of 12, I really just wanted to join the military. My dad he was in for 16 years. My grandfather was in. I had a brother in the Navy who would come home with a duffel. It was like it was almost like cliche, kind of show up with a duffel bag and he'd have all these gifts from Hong Kong or Hawaii or Australia, or like he'd just been all over the place. And I'm just like, okay, I want that. And really just wanted to travel.
Yeah.
And so once university was done, I applied and got right up through and spent a week on a destroyer doing exercises, and they took 36 out of, I think, 400 people, and I was for maritime surface and subsurface, and was going to travel, and that was going to be the way in. And I didn't having an arts degree doesn't really put you at the top of the selection tier, and I ended up, they offered me artillery or infantry, and that was like, I just had visions of being in Gagetown or Edmonton for the rest of my life, and that wasn't really doing it. So I remember walking by there was an art store in Ottawa. I was doing some tests in Ottawa to get into this, and there was an art store, and I thought, okay, if this doesn't work, if this military thing doesn't work out, I'm going to do something with art. I always loved drawing and being creative, and so that it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, and then I did some odd jobs for a while, and then get into a commercial art program at George Brown here in Toronto. Sat beside Frank Lepre, and we've been friends ever since. But that was kind of how it happened. And I got a job in a studio after that, making it was like $6 an hour doing artwork for vinyl binder covers out in Scarborough, and that wasn't really paying the bills too well. So I quit that and worked in a paper mill for a year, making what I thought was good money at the time.
So were the military guys in your family like advertising?
Not
What's
really.
wrong with you?
I remember my mom saying, when I finally got a job in the business, I was at Foster Advertising, my very first job, and I was all excited to get in, and she was just kind of, she wasn't like super excited. I'm like, well, you don't sound that happy. She goes, well, yeah, it's pretty good. She goes, I just always saw you at the CBC.
Which was hurtful. Yeah.
But no, it was good. And I was actually still working at the paper mill when Mike and I became roommates, and he was at Nathan Fraser, and I was trying to get my book together, and he was helpful there.
So why the move from, you said that you had a love of drawing and stuff, and the natural step to me would be art direction and design. When did the words take over?
I don't know. I guess I was greedy. The first book I did, I spent a lot of time on it. I still love, I just found it again the other day, and we're just going through a lot of stuff in a sea container up north, and it's like all this stuff, and I really just went to town on the illustrations and just spent a lot of time on it, and had lines, and just like the idea, ideas, like having really good ideas and trying to have, 18 of them in a book that you could just, everyone was hopefully a slap in the face, kind of no weak links in it. So I was looking for a job as an art director or a writer, and when I first started interviewing, that was, they're like, what do you want to be? And I'm like, well, either one. And then some were like, you should pick one. You should go in, with a focus. And but I just wanted to get in, and so the first job I got was as a writer.
So how old would you have been? I'm thinking with the mililitary stuff, and does that mean
well,
you're a little bit more?
That was probably a couple of months out of my life after university, so that wasn't like a. But certainly doing odd jobs, like I worked in a cheese factory, a craft cheese out in Ingleside for quite a while, and then the George Brown program was it was one of those manpower programs, so you actually get paid $165 a week in Toronto, and even to get that, I'd been. They had ongoing layoffs at Kraft Cheese, and so I was just short my insurable week's earnings. So I ended up making a legitimate company in order to pay myself and pay my CPP and save my EI or UI back in those days. Yeah, so I had enough to get into the program at George Brown to actually come here because I was broke, like I didn't have any money. So to actually get to Toronto and have, have $165 a week was something. Yeah, it was the only way it was going to happen. So
interesting. So the first agency you worked at, was that Foster?
yeah,
And you got the job as a writer.
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And then, so who was your creative director? Like, was there someone at Foster who kind of, took you under their wing and showed you the ropes a little bit?
Yeah, it was Barry Campbell. Barry Campbell and Ross Jarvis were two of the big writers in there. Or Ross was the writer. I actually got an offer from Marlene Hoare, was my first, because I'd been to, I went to V&B and I was seeing like Harry Yates, and then I saw John Kiriakou at JWT, and then he liked my book, and then he brought in Brad Riddick, and he looked at the book and he liked it, and all the while they're looking at my book, this woman comes in and she actually walks over my portfolio to grab some cigarettes off of John's desk, and then she's back, and I thought she was like, I don't know who she was, and then later found it. Then they said, yeah, we love your book, we're gonna let you see Marlene now, and then sure enough it's her, and she's in there smoking in her office, and she liked the book, and then she asked me how many more interviews I had, because I was geared up, like I was leaving my job in a paper mill, and I was finally gonna get, and I had probably a dozen interviews lined up, and she's like, how many interviews? And I told her, and she says, cancel them all, we'll give you a job right now.
Wow.
And I'm like, I said, you know what, I've worked so hard to get to this point, I want to finish all these interviews. And she was she respected it, she goes, okay. And then Rhea was her assistant at the time, and she kept calling, what's going on? And I was seeing all these places. Then I saw Barry, and Barry was like, I love your stuff. He said, but we're waiting on an account. They had just won DuPont, and they were waiting for it to come in from Campbell Ewald, where Terry was working. He says, we can't quite hire you yet, but we want to bring you in. And I kept putting time. And then at a certain point, I'm like, I can't hold these guys off anymore. And I was still phoning to get other interviews. Like I remember talking to Stephen Creed on the phone, and he's like, wait a second, you're on the street, and you've never worked in the business, you got an offer from Thompson, and you're still out calling for interviews. I'm like, well, I just feel I want to see as many people as possible. He goes, you should just take that job and just, I don't even want to see you. I'm not going to be complicit in this kind of,
So did you follow through and see other, or did you take his advice?
No, I did. No, I followed through. I saw as many as I could, and then Barry finally said, sorry, it's probably, guys taking the headset off. Barry said, you know what, it's not quite in yet, but we'll bring you in. And that was it was kind of cool because like for the first 6 weeks, I really didn't have anything to do except see all these boxes come in from Campbell Ewald with all this DuPont stuff, and a lot of it Terry had written. There's some amazing stuff. It was like looking at an awards annual, it's just all these, this is some great work, and I was going to be working on that account, and then other accounts like they hit Carling O'Keefe and General Motors and Miller High Life, and so I'm working on beer and stuff, and I'm first in the business. Actually, the first ad I did in an agency was they gave us it was a full-page ad from Carling O'Keefe to thank the Toronto Argonauts for the season, and so we had to do an ad if they won and an ad if they lost, and you got 2 hours go. And that was like the first job. Like, shit, I've been sitting around for 6 weeks, and then I get an ad for 2 hours. And the ad that if they lost was better, so I was...
So you're hoping that that would happen.
Yeah.
And it didn't.
It had. Toronto lost.
They lost. Okay.
And then we had it was a full page, and it was like this thank you. It was just like a little
Well,
piece,
back when
piece
people
of copy.
used to do that, I feel like no one does that anymore.
Does what?
Like thank you ads and...
Oh, really?
Okay. I don't know. Maybe I just don't read enough, but...
Yeah, I don't know if I'd ever done another one after that. But it was... Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a superior ad.
Yeah.
Then the winning one was just kind of cliche, but, we had 2 hours, so...
So, hearing you talk about that story just makes me think the mentality of a freelance writer, because even then, even in your first job, the idea of not taking this thing that's offered to you to see what else is out there is kind of at the heart of what I think is in the mind of a freelance or the, it's a special breed of person. I mean, I lock in my mortgage. I don't go with the variable, right? Even though everyone goes, you're going to win in the variable. You just be okay. I love security, and that's why I'm like, I'm a serial monogamist when it comes to work and stuff like that. But that's not your mentality, and it can't be. I don't think, if you're going to be happy in a freelance writer.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, it seems riskier, especially, now especially, but even like through the years, like I've been doing it for 30 years, and over the 30 years, like you just see like people that kind of get entrenched or locked into places, and to me, that's riskier, because if you get whacked at that, now you're really starting over, where you're out there pounding the pavement, and you're trying to make relationships and trying to make things happen. Where I think choosing freelance, it's kind of like you're constantly in that flux and uncertainty, and you certainly meet more people, and your network kind of gets broader and wider, and you can I think you can land a little easier once if you have that kind of network.
I mean, I know working on the audio side, we would have voiceover people come in, Jamie Watson being one of them.
Great.
And all those actors would then, as soon as Jamie walked into the room, they would go, well, Jamie's going to get it, right? And we would call it the usual suspects, because it's a big market, but there is a lot of the same group of people who could do that job really well, both on the male and female side. I'm thinking that the freelance market's probably a lot like that too, right?
I think so. It seems to be more people doing it now. Like when I first started doing it and really kind of choosing to do that, I think freelance then was more a euphemism for looking for your next gig. I'm freelance now. It's like where, I really fought it. I mean, you and I worked at Chiat, like that was Duncan, kind of really pushed me to sign a contract for a year, which I'm glad he did. I mean, I was still freelance, but he really wanted to lock me up, and sorry. The Froman hands. Is it? Okay. So I totally lost that.
Yeah, you were just saying like Duncan tried to lock you in, and you still didn't want to do that. And
so I didn't, and I fought it, and then signed again, and I'm glad I did, because we lost Canadian Airlines.
I remember that. Yeah, I do.
So, and if you remember, so we had TBWA and Chiat come together while we were there. Lee Cloud come up and talk to us, and but they wanted to, the TBWA wanted to infuse the network, the TBWA network, with Chiat thinking, and so all of a sudden, like Steve Driggs and I, they're like, anywhere you guys want to go. And to me, like that, I mean, that was a big part of getting in this business, was to travel. And I always said I'd never buy a car before I bought an airline ticket, and just to be able to go, travel and do it's quite a nomadic job. And I think it's easier for a writer, like an English writer, to go into some of those markets and make that happen. So like I was talking to Uli Weisendang, like the W in TBWA, and I was going to go to Frankfurt, and then I tacked on, so I went to Sweden and Amsterdam and England, and just like tried to see as many shops as I could, and really started to, just to have that opportunity at Chiat was good. So and I fought. I don't think that would have happened had I not been on a long-term contract with those guys. So.
And how did those guys open doors for you? I think most people would sit back and sort of go, I can't just get on a plane and start visiting agencies in different countries and different continents and try to make that happen. Like, without putting too fine a point on it, do you have to be a good saver?
A saver in
well, it costs money to travel around without a gig and try to find one.
I don't know about that. It doesn't. Like, I think. Like the first time, so I worked at Foster, and I was there 9 months. I was kind of behaving like a freelancer. You're kind of astutely picking up on it a little bit, I guess, and I never really thought of it that way. But something would happen to me if I was in a place too long, like whether I got bored or frustrated, or things weren't happening fast enough. And I really was, trying to do a lot of stuff early on, and just like boom, 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 and like Barry leaving, he goes, you got a DPS in your first 3 months, and you got this, and he goes, why are you, basically why aren't you happy, kind of thing, and I just wanted, and then when I went to, so Marlene kept in touch. I went to JWT and I showed the work I was doing at Foster, and she's just like really kind of warm on everything in there. She goes, eh. And then I'd been keeping this book. I called it my morgue. Like I had a little tombstone on the front, and any ideas that died, I would kind of zoom them down on a photocopier and stick them in this book. And I'm like, well, here are the stuff. And she's like,
Here's what led up to this.
yeah,
right?
well, and the stuff that died. It was just a lot of dead stuff. And she's like, if you come here, then you'll be getting, you can
We'll
do
do
more
your
of this
dead
stuff.
work.
Yeah, so that kind of pulled me in there. And then I was there about 9 months, and I got frustrated again. And then and I'd always wanted to work at SMW. And so I ended up getting in there, and that made a huge difference in just how I looked at the job and everything. I mean, that's a whole thing in itself. But yes, once I had enough money, I paid off my student loans. I think, like to your question, I think I had about $5,000 saved, and then a ticket, like it was an open ticket, and I just went out. I started, pre-internet days, but just calling around and trying to. So I talked to some people. There was a Canadian at JWT in Hong Kong, and so I called him. And then I showed up in town. I booked 2 days hotel in Wan Chai, and then and I had my portfolio with me, and then just saw as many shops as I could, and really felt like it felt very exotic. Like you were out there, pre-cell phone days, and you're just like you really felt like you were on the other side of the planet.
Wow.
And with portfolio, and and I had to move from a fairly nice hotel after 2 days into Jerry Weiss at JWT. He introduced me to this guy Rizvi. He's from Sri Lanka. He goes, "Oh, my cousin stays in this place in Kowloon, and you're going through these alleyways and stuff, and we get into this little guest house, and it's like these doors with acrylic numbers on them, and it was." Really bad paneling from the 70s, but it was, I think I was paying $22 a night, and I stayed there, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks trying to see as many places and find a gig, and it was exciting.
Did you stay there?
I stayed there. I was actually I was a real nerd, and I really wanted to go to Singapore. It seemed like, Ball Partnership was doing amazing things,
Right.
and Beatty, and there was just some great work being done, and but when I got to Hong Kong, it was the first leg. It was an exciting place, and then I got in this rooming house, and I met all these people. I mean, I got friends for life from that 6 weeks.
Wow.
And so I saw I was starting to run out of money in Hong Kong, so I'm like, I better get to Singapore if this is what I want to do. So I flew there, and then I started seeing agencies there. Actually, John Kiriakou again was out there by then, and I get a phone call from an agency back in Hong Kong, and they're like, we want to offer you a job. Like, what the fuck are you doing in Singapore? So I get on a plane, and I took a job at this shitty little shop out in North Point, and I remember bringing my book. When I was interviewing there, they were slaughtering pigs like on the way to, and I was trying to keep my book from getting blood on it, and it was just like in the middle of nowhere. And anyway, I took that job, and then John calls me from Singapore. He goes, "We want to hire you here." I'm like, "Fuck!" I just took this gig, and
I'm going to leave this slaughterhouse agency high and dry. How can I do that?
Oh, and I didn't know it at the time, but they worked Saturdays. It was a mandatory work day. You did a half day on Saturdays, which really kind of blew. And the work was, and having come from SMW, where it was such a, I felt like I was going to Harvard there. Like, it was just like all these great writers. Jim Ranscombe was in there, and Gary Lennox was in there, and Michael Paul was in there. And again, they were up on Mount Pleasant, and you go up the 4 flights of stairs, and there's all these ads on the wall, and it was like going into an award show, and you just like, it was just like it was day and night for me to see this kind of work, and they were winning tons of stuff, and there were things you couldn't do reason ads, you couldn't do puns, like there was a real kind of.
Wow.
So when I got to Hong Kong, I could just
do whatever you want.
Puns were flying, and the reasons were flying, because it was happening really quick, and I'm like, shit. Anyway, I was at a party, met some people from DDB. And then I went in there to see Hans Ebert, and he's like, he saw my stuff, and he hired me there. And then I was there not quite a year, because it just got a little. Once again, I got kind of frustrated, and moved on.
I mean, I have very limited experience in terms of working in other markets. I did spend a couple years in New York.
Yeah.
The one thing that I did experience was, you know, I before I left New York, I was shopping. I was freelancing. I freelanced a little bit at McLaren, and then I was shopping my book around Toronto, and I was getting sort of like lukewarm kind of results. Then I started interviewing in New York, and they wanted to talk. Everybody wanted to talk to me, and I thought to myself, what is it about different markets where people react differently? And I don't know if, I mean, you have a ton of experience in that. When you went over there and they looked at your work, did you get a better response, a warmer response?
I think so. I think there was a
Exoticness?
I think I was exotic. I was like kind of American, you know, like they had, you know, somebody called them, I had American headlines, like these kind of, you know, punchy kind of all type ads, or, you know, they were, you know, where there was a lot of amazing, like some really gorgeous art direction that was out there. I mean, I still have pieces that I, you know, gladly show from that time, because it's just really smart, and it looks amazing. You know, like when you open an annual or something, and you see like some of the, you know, like illustrations and photography and typography, and it's just all, it's, you know, it's somebody spent a lot of time just crafting, and yeah. So to have some of that it was a nice kind of little texture to the book.
What was the biggest cultural difference in terms of being a writer in those markets? Like, was there something weird that happened that we were like, oh no, I can't talk about that in ads, or what was the biggest cultural challenge, and why?
I don't know if it's a cult. Well, I mean, that's a good question. Probably one of the reasons I left TDB, because every 3.5 weeks we're doing a new campaign for McDonald's. That was the other. So they made me. I was only there like 6 months, and then they made me a group creative director on McDonald's, and they had like three McDonald's at the time. I'm really dating myself. This is like early '90s. I think there were 3 shops in mainland China, and then there was a bunch of them in Hong Kong, and they used to have Ronald McDonald would use the agency as the change room. So this guy would show up, and then he'd, you know, put on his Ronald gear, and then he'd go off to some store opening, or there was some event in Hong Kong. And I'm like, you know, and I'm Ronald McDonald, so I'm like, hey. But then there was one Ronald. He was from, I can't remember his name, but he was from Calgary. So we got along really well. I think his name was Vince or something. And then so it was another Ronald another day, and I'm like, Vince, and then he's in makeup. So he's like, no, I'm Ronald. I'm like, no, but you're Vince, right? He goes, no, I'm Ronald. Like
character.
Totally in character. Like he would not break character. And then I'm like, yeah, but I said, from Calgary. He goes, I said, oh, you must be one of the other Ronalds. And he goes, there's only one Ronald.
There's only
McDonald.
one Ronald,
Yeah.
and that's me. And you said, fuck you. Pull out your driver's license. Ronald McDonald.
Yeah, I'm actually 6 months older than him. So, but yeah, so we're doing like new ads every 3.5 weeks, and you're doing trail liners, and you're doing TV. Like TV's super cheap out in Hong Kong. Like I said, it's cheaper than print, and so we had this thing with like these little Mic Transformers, and so we made like this 3D sci-fi Mic Transformers from outer space, and our managing director from Australia, he's like, this is the best thing that McDonald's has ever done out here. And then the next one was it was chicken McNuggets, 3 new Asian sauces, plus a trip to each of those 3 Asian countries.
Right.
So we had to show the plane, all 3 Asian destinations, and the 3 sauces, and 30 seconds go, and you got $35,000 to pull this off, right? And it's just, and there's like no time. Plus you're working on all these other accounts, and then we had this. It was a Chinese guy. I should remember his name. It'll come to me. But he's from England, and he's got this Cockney. So he's a Chinese guy with this Cockney accent. Hey, how's it going on? He's like, yo, what you working on? And then I'm like, and I told him about the Asian sauce, and he starts clucking like a chicken. And I'm like, would you do that on camera? It was just real Wild West kind of stuff. And he goes, yeah, sure. So we got him in a studio, and basically it was him clucking and going through, this promotion and then for the for the destinations, we put him on a skateboard and we pushed him through frame, and he would cluck and fly by all these destinations, and we got it all. And then we just had supers, like subtitles. And I thought, fuck, this is brilliant. I'm gonna be on Johnny Carson. This is like gonna be a really quirky. And then it was done, and he'd come on. So it was supposed to be sync sound in the studio, and like everything was in sync, like the air conditioners were on, and so all the levels were. So we had to restripe the whole audio, and then he'd been on Alec Wu. He was doing a 24-hour lock off of a mobile gas station. So he was up all night, and then we had to bring him in studio to redub his clucking. And it was the most anemic clucking kind of, and then they had to bring in another VO to try to match the cluck, and the thing was a mess. And then apparently there's some culture to your question, long-winded answer. It's not appropriate for or polite to imitate an animal like a chicken. So it's just got a lot of backlash, this whole spot, and it was pulled. And yeah, I went from being the hero with the previous McTransformer thing to this is the worst thing we've ever done for McDonald's. Like,
do you think that's the reason why no one stepped in who maybe been in town for more than 5 minutes and said, hey, the acting like an animal thing, maybe?
Yeah, you'd think.
Give me a heads up, that would be nice.
Someone would show up. It was, yeah, that and a few other things. We were working on some Hong Kong Hilton stuff too that I had some fun with, and yeah, yeah.
So now, you're out there, you're working in Singapore,
Didn't
China.
get to Singapore.
Didn't get to.
No, I was in Hong Kong. And then got frustrated with the way things were. So on the way to Singapore, I stopped in Bangkok, and this is kind of where the freelance really started to kick in. So I worked with Blair Curry. He was at JWT in Toronto, and then he took a job with McCann Erickson in Bangkok, and then we'd been talking on the phone, so I showed up, and I met his creative director, as a guy from Atlanta. Showed him the book. He goes, we have this, and this going on. You want to help us? So it was like a freelance gig. I'm like, sure, yeah. So I ended up staying there for a few months, and and it was very Wild West, where I was doing some bank brochures to keep the lights on, but then there'd be like this Shakey's Pizza thing, or this like a Motorola job, and they would basically come to me and negotiate, like, we need this American adapt to do this, blah blah blah, and then they'd ask me how much, and I don't know, like 500 baht, like, and me like a half hour worth of work, and they would just bring me stuff, and we'd negotiate on the spot, and then you could stay on a beach for like $5 in Thailand at the time, so it was a really it was kind of like the kind of the skies parted a little bit, and the angels started singing. It's like, yeah, I like this moving around a little bit, and yeah, so I did that, and then I came back to Canada just to regroup, and I was going to go back out again, but I ended up getting that was probably one of my last full-time jobs, was at Ambrose Carr.
Okay.
And even that, when I was getting ready to leave again, I was already thinking about going to Australia and New Zealand, and they lost Harvey's. I think it was Harvey's, and again they had to call. I remember jokingly getting some Scotch tape and with putting a dotted line on it and just wrapping it around my neck, and like I was gonna leave anyway, and then Doug called me into his office one day and told me through sports analogies why I wasn't right. He says there's two types of people in this business. He goes, you got the grinders and those guys that like to be out in front of the net with the puck. He says we need grinders right now that are going to go in the corners and do the dirty work.
Wow.
He says, I see you as a guy out in front of the net that likes to have the puck. And yeah, fair enough. Then they gave me a nice severance check that totally paid for the trip, and I took off again and started to freelance in other places.
So what would you say is the moment when you're working at a place where you would say, you know what, I'm getting that old feeling that I don't like about working in this place, and what are those things? Is it process driven? Is it Is it just the sense that, you know, your time is done there? Like, what's the thing? I mean, I freelanced a little bit, and I would say that, you know, it's safe to say that you kind of are protected from the politics of a place when you kind of fly in, you're a hired gun, you do your job, and then you kind of leave, and you don't get involved in the internal politics that can sometimes be the hardest part about working at a place for a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on it was about the work. Like, you get so invested in it as you know, and you just love something, and then for whatever reason it died. Like, not that I was taking my ball and going home, but it's just like there's got to be a better place than this, like to get the work out. And I would get frustrated really easy, and just wanted to do good work. And if I couldn't get it there, then I'd start looking somewhere else. And then it would be a feeling that, yeah, I'm frustrated, but then it's like, once that switch went off, it's like there was this excitement that would come. It's just like the whole world opens up again. It's just like, okay, what am I going to do next? Like, it's just like, where do I go next? It's that part was exciting, and not just like traveling other places, but even in town, like to go from Thompson, where it's just like this big machine, and you know, got some nice work out of it, but to get into a place like an SMW that was just really, you know, just all about the creative work, and just like to see the level of the writing, and yeah, it was that was exciting. And then I still loved, you know, that was, you know, when people ask me my favorite place it would be SMW. But I really just wanted to travel, and so like after about a year and a half, and I had the money, Michael gave me, you know, great reference letters, and yeah, and he was always saying, you know, you always have a place here when you come back, and yeah, just the excitement, I think, is something that's usually more pulled away, like pulled than pushed, yeah, if that makes sense.
I think now. You'd mentioned earlier that it seems like there's more people in this kind of talent pool, or maybe there's just more people who are going project per project, less lifers and so on. You know, I'll ask you a two-part question. The first is, what would your advice be to someone, especially a younger person who's getting in the business, who feels as though the freelance life is something for them? And secondly, I think the biggest fear for a lot of people, I know it is for me, is dry spells and not driving yourself crazy and not freaking out. And like, what was the longest dry spell for you?
It was probably after moving up north, which I'd never experienced really. I've been really blessed, and I try not to burn too many bridges, and just try to be, just try to be responsible and not, you know, fuck around with anything, and so I've never had to hustle that much here, but once I moved up north, like the phone stopped ringing, and I should have seen that coming with you know, I'd been doing a lot of stuff at Anomaly for the last well, not in the last year and a half, but I was about for 5 years before moving out of town. And when you think of it, yeah, a lot of the time you're just going from like one edit suite to another, doing a lot of, like at certain times, yeah, there's a lot of corporate programming and corporate videos. And like, I think one year we did like 17 videos we did it over probably 6 weeks, and it was a lot of work. So you're just going from edit suite to edit suite, and just like to try to do that from afar, you know, like just sending huge files, like the massive files, and you know, to get little edit changes, where if you can just keep going suite to suite all day, you know, you're going to move it along a lot further than trying to do it. So it makes sense that it kind of drive. But so, yeah, that was a bit, I wasn't expecting that, and then to really have to hustle. I mean, this became part of it too I got my last gig based on some maple syrup. But yeah, I think in terms of advice, it would be just keep hustling, like just keep, you know, Terry often used to, and then he gave great advice back in the day where, you know who you're talking to, know what they're about, know some of the stuff they've worked on, like ask questions, like just really, and now it's so easy to do that. Like I remember, you know, you'd have an interview lined up, so I'd go to the reference library and try to find an old marketing annual that I could, you know, see who worked on what, and take notes, and who's doing the work, and then you could kind of throw that into into your interview or your conversation with somebody, and yeah, you could see that it would something chemical would go on if they know you've done a little research. It just pushes you along. So I think like always hustling and just know who you're talking to. It's a different world out there now. It's like it's easier in some ways, but I think it's a lot harder in other ways. I think that certainly the pool and there's no I don't know, loyalty seems like just companies it's just all changing and it's all getting smaller. Like there's only a few big holding companies like doing all this. Like it's I don't know. I think it's I don't know if I'd want to be doing it now. Like it'd be tough.
Well, and I know I feel like pay scale too has changed drastically over the last decade or so too. I think what people were demanding at one point, especially in creative departments, probably is not as prevalent as it used to be. I know,
No.
like one story I share is like I went to the spy party,
Yeah,
the
we used
summer
to go to
party,
those all the
right?
time.
All
Yeah,
the
great.
time.
Yep.
And I'm waiting in line, and there's a guy behind me, and I strike up a conversation with him, and he's got a baseball hat and a backpack on. He's wearing sandals or whatever, and I'm like, and who are you? And he tells me he's the creative director of a pretty name agency in town. And I was like, my notion of a creative director when I got in the business was someone who wore, very nice clothing, probably drove a sports car, was paid very, very, very well, and there's been a big, massive shift in pay scale, I would say, in creative departments in North America, at least.
Yeah. And I think like we were talking earlier, like that Fiverr mentality, where they're just like it becomes this commodity where people think it's just, Jim Ranscombe at SMW always had a great line. Is like he would solve a problem and put it in front of a client, and there was a client one time asked him like, how long did it take you to come up with this? And he said 25 years.
Right.
It's just like that. That speed to be able to get to the solutions quicker is, I think that's probably our only real commodity now, is just the experience to get to a solution faster, because there's a lot of kids out there that'll do it for a fraction of the price. But
I remember this was the later part of my time in the audio suite, but I remember there was this point at which I would a creative director would walk in the room, and I realized that sometimes I might be older than them, right?
Yeah.
And so what's that like? I mean, I think you touched on ages, and maybe we weren't on mic when we were talking about it. But is that a real thing or not? I imagine most of the creative directors you're talking to now, you're probably more senior than.
yeah, I won't name a shot. I had that recently where I got briefed on a job, and I thought, just the demeanor of somebody, you kind of, okay, this person's this, and I didn't know the players as well. I guess I wasn't taking my own advice, but I already got the gig, and then, but I was briefed in on a job, and I'm like, and who's the creative director? And somebody I thought was maybe on the account side, so he's like, that would be me. I'm like, okay, it's like, I can make that work.
Great start, Ron.
It's like,
Then all of a sudden, all of your ideas sucked from that moment on. Maybe.
But yeah, it's they are a lot younger. But there's some really talented young people. I still get excited about that, seeing like some of these kids that are, I don't mean that in any pejorative way or anything, but there's some of these young kids are just, some really talented people out there, and they're like, and doing shit, and it's still fun to be around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think how technology has changed portfolio creating has been a massive thing. You have people who looks like it's a fully realized thing, and then thinking back about portfolios that I used to see that were, they weren't maybe back, the whole napkin comment that, the old timers used to talk about, which if it's a great idea, it's on a napkin, it's still great. It's like, no one's walking in with a napkin now. It's just,
although Legis Delaney for a few years, that was their website, was just
A
all their
napkin?
famous work with just little napkin drawings showing that the idea is still there. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like, remember, I think you were probably at Chai when Tom Gowdy's book came in. He had that big wooden thing.
That's right.
And me and Duncan asked me to help. Like we basically destroyed his book. Do you remember that? Like, so he had that big wooden book, and he had like the kids block.
Oh yeah,
with the
that's
string,
right. Yeah.
With the brass handles, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
all laminated inside. Sorry, and then so Duncan had the idea of let's destroy his book, so he has to come here and build a new one. That was the thing. We loved your book, and then when you opened it up, we basically had the shards and the ashes of his book with little pieces of lamination and the brass fittings were all in there. It says, "Now come to Chai it and start a new one," and that was his acceptance letter. You know, like just like that kind of. Those were fun.
That's a great.
things.
That's a great story. I didn't hear that one. I remember the portfolio, but I didn't know that you guys.
Yeah, we basically replicated it and then destroyed the reproduction, and then we sent that to him.
And you sent it to his home.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I was like, I really want to see his face as he opens up this thing and says, "What is this recruitment technique?"
But those are fun. Fun ways of doing
Is
things.
your sense that the work that's in the marketplace now is better than it was before, as good, just different?
I think it's just different. I mean, I'm probably not the best judge of that. You still try to look for ideas, and to me, it's still like that's the currency of what we do is the idea, and I find it harder now. Like I think a lot of people are thinking on screens. There's no like scribbling down, like whether it be a napkin or a notebook, but it's just like a lot of thinking on screens. And I don't know, I get lost in that a little bit. I don't find it that easy to really get somewhere. And it's like really like, you have these clean desks. Like, I don't know, I love going into someone's office and seeing a mess and seeing tons of stuff stuck on their walls and just like a lot of reference stuff like that. But it's, there's now like this push to experiential kind of like that. It feels also, a lot of it's so disposable. It's so like temporally kind of just like these little moments, and how many people really see it. And I think often, I'm going to sound really cynical now, but I think a lot of times that there's more thinking and crafting put into the case study video that then goes to the award shows as opposed, to what was actually done for the actual event, and how many people did you really move or, persuade to do something in that moment when you did this little thing? Like, how many people saw that? Where it just feels a little, so there's some smoke and mirrors to some of this stuff.
Yeah, I feel like there was a time where the work that was awarded was the work that you would see and experience when you just went out.
Yeah.
You'd see it on TV, or you'd see it on a billboard or whatever. And I also think that the media itself, back then it just required that ideas were like crystallized and very clear. Like you could open up your portfolio and you could show an outdoor board, and it either worked or it didn't.
Yeah, you see the DNA all the way through, and this is what it looked like, and this is how it sounded in radio, and this is what it was like on TV, and and you could get into, even if you are on a whatever social platform or experiential thing, you should still be able to, there should be some kind of connective thread to the whole thing. But I don't know, I just think there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm very old and jaded.
Well, I mean, I've had this conversation with other writers too, where this downward pressure on budgets has kind of blown the middle out of a lot of like even big agencies.
Well, that's a whole other thing.
The middle's not there anymore.
No.
And so this connection to maybe younger creatives that are coming in aren't connected because the senior guys are just trying to put out fires, and they don't have that time. You don't have that intermediate kind of level who can bring someone along, coach them along, get really strategic with them, give them that kind of foundation of strategy as they get more senior and hone their craft of writing.
I don't know if that goes on. I mean, maybe I'm not around it enough as a freelancer, but I don't know if that's going on as much anymore. Like when I was at Thompson in the day, we were part of the account management training program. Like, and everybody, all the juniors went through that, and you would every Wednesday for 2 hours, you'd have production come in and teach you about production, and you'd have George Clements come in and teach you about strategy and writing a T plan, and you'd have Leslie Pratt talking about, like how to get the most for your production dollar and stuff. And you'd learn, and then you could actually go different departments. Like apparently that's how Brad Riddick was an account guy, and he got to be in the creative department for a little while just to, get steeped in that a little bit. And then he wrote some stuff that won some awards and became became Brad. Like, he's done well, and I don't know if that goes on as much anymore. And certainly, like at SMW, like I keep bringing them up, but when I went there, and one of the first pieces they gave me was a 12-page brochure for Yamaha marine accessories, and it's like, and they were ruthless on copy. Like, so, it was just such a daunting thing. And then you'd write something, you'd spend days on it, and Jim would just be like, no, you can't say that. That's lazy, you're lazy. And he goes, look, your job, he said, your job's to get from the headline to the logo, and you got to keep them. You got to keep their attention all the way. And if you put one lazy line in there, you're going to lose them. They're on to an article on Tibetan tapestries or something like, and he's like, they'll be flipping the page. And so and he would just, it was just, just to get one line through him would be a thing. And then, and eventually you'd get a couple lines, and I still remember the day, like it was like winning an award. Like I gave him on the run in the hallway, we were both going, and I said, it was for snowmobiles. And he's like, it's good. And then he kept, I'm like, there's no change. And he said, no, it's good. And that was it. And it was just like, that was like
Finally.
Huge. It was like huge. And they were, and you get discouraged getting there, but he's like, this is, and he would call it the University of Body Copy. And there's like, and anyone that's ever worked for Jim, they either there or at Ranscombe and Company, like they all, they all have those chops, because how hard he is. And as hard as he is on writers, he's really hard on art directors as well. And he's just like really, I don't know if that kind of mentorship goes on much anymore.
Yeah, I had a similar experience where I had, was writing a campaign, and what did I do? Well, I cut and pasted the few lines of copy that go down at the bottom, hyper focused on what was going on at the top. They're all slightly different. They're all a kind of variation on a theme.
Yeah.
And then, I think it was Tom Gowdy who's like, I don't want to catch you ever doing that again, right? Do not just duplicate it. Well, communicating the same thing, but everyone should be unique. So it's great advice. And it's real writer's advice too.
Yeah. And I know Tom's very methodical. Kind of remember some meetings at Chiat, and he'd just like really get into the weeds of where we're going with stuff. And he has that mind to kind of see through all that.
Very strong strategic mind.
Yeah,
for sure.
Can I get some more water? Is there?
So I'm gonna wrap up with maybe a couple last questions.
Sure.
I often ask people near the end, kind of like, well, what are you doing now that's really, floats your boat? And it could be something, personal, or it could be work related.
That's a good question. Probably, well, certainly moving up to the farm has been a learning curve, and it's kind of like travel too, where I love getting in a situation, whether it's a new agency or a new country or situation, where you're just, you get in, you don't know what the fuck's going on, and you got to kind of think your way out of it, and just problem solve your way out of it. And I like doing that. I have my plate's full doing that. I still have some side projects out in PEI that I'm trying to get off the ground for the last 15 years, and that still excites me, and things are starting to happen there a little bit.
Is that advertising related?
No.
It's just a personal project.
Yeah, it's like I'm from the East Coast, and we've always had property out there, so I've kind of been doing this Duty Kravitz thing and just getting a lot of land in this area in PEI, and I bought this decrepit amusement park a couple of years ago, and just trying to make it all fit. Oh, cheers! Thank you. If I weren't doing the ad thing, I still love creating things. Still love, making something and getting it out there. But I could just be I could just as easily be happy like carving something or painting something or just making shit. And it doesn't have to be an ad, but it's still fun to do this. I still get excited, trying to solve a problem, because it really gets down to, okay, here's what you got to do. Here's where we are, and here's where we want to get to, and how do we get there? It's just, that's the path every time.
Well, that was going to be my last question was, does a freelance writer ever retire? I don't know why I say that. Like, I guess I say that because, you're the life of your work is in short periods of time, whereas, you know, and maybe it's not that common anymore, where someone would work somewhere for decades and then kind of, you know, this natural shift into the twilight of their career. But I always see freelancers as just hustle their whole lives.
Yeah, and maybe this blows your theory out to me, like the freelance versus regular, like a full-time staffer, like I think it's an accounting thing, and I don't know how many times I've said that. Like any other market, like I worked in Montreal for a year and a half, and it's just like they want to bring you on full-time, but it's like, you know what, like, and by then I had a numbered company, and it's like, you know, if we can do the books like this, or, you know, it's basically an accounting thing, and I would have my accountant talk to their accountants and make shit happen. Same, you know, working for Robin or, you know, probably, I don't know, half dozen to, at least a half dozen places where I've worked, you know, a good chunk of time. Like, say, like Dentsu, I was there for 2.5 years. I was creative director there, but I was still freelance. I was, you know, still had the money would go through my company, and it was really just an accounting thing. So I felt completely embedded. It wasn't like I could walk away, all that stuff about feeling, you know, I'm free and I can say fuck you any day. Well, you know, when you get in a place, and especially if you start hiring people, and you're bringing people in, like your people that, you know, you get a lot, you can't just walk away from that. Like you're in there, right? Like you're, so I don't know, like freelance versus full time. I think I don't know, there's a lot of overlap there. You know, I don't know if I see a big difference. And then there's certainly some downsides to being freelance. I was talking to a guy last night, someone that came from the full-time world but was freelancing, and just noticing how, you know, if you're not there to babysit something, you know, whether, you know, names change on the work, or the work gets, you know, it gets tweaked or whatever, where it's just not, you can't hang on to it. You can't preserve it. I mean, maybe you have a piece of foam core or something, but you can't
Have you ever had
Have
you ever had a situation where you did some really work that you're really proud of, and you did it, but you were asked for your name not to be on it?
Yes. But not at. No, yeah, no to being asked that. But I've had instances where actually, you know, working at Pirate, and I'll be careful.
Yeah, we'll talk about the editing.
No, but I remember being in a session at Pirate on some really good work. It wasn't my idea, but I brought a lot of ideas for some radio spot. We did a ton of radio, working with Terry, and reading a magazine, and then reading about the team that were attached to this work, and then talking about them being and doing this radio now, and then I saw the call sheet, and I was down as there's a writer and an art director, but I was down as a creative consultant. I'm like, So then I called the ECD back there. I'm like, what's a creative consultant? He's like, you know, I get my next job based on my last job, and I'm not really comfortable. I said, if this is ghostwriting, my rates are double, and I was pissed, and.
Right.
And he's like, let me get back to you. And then he talks to the people involved. And then he comes back and goes, okay, you can have your name on it, but their names are going to be, I'm like, I don't care how many names you have on it. I just want to be recognized because I'm, you know, working on this stuff. And it wasn't like a real fly in, fly out. It was an ongoing campaign. And that you know, that's happened a couple times. But yeah, it's I'm not into actually that's not, I'll ghostwrite, but, it has to be good money.
This episode has been brought to you by the National Advertising Challenge, North America's only brief-based challenge that sends winners to Cannes, France.